We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Hey guys! There is the part 4 of What If Naruto Made a Bet of a Lifetime. A childish challenge between teacher and student triggers a chain of events whose outcomes ripple across the ninja world. As the dominoes fall, crashing on the shoulders of the child of prophecy, one question needs to be asked. Will he bear it all, or crumble under the weight of the world? Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 12, Interlude 2, Life in the Leaf Part 2. Sakura. Sakura closed the book that was now resting on her lap as a long sigh escaped her lips. Many thoughts were running through her mind, and she didn't know how to process all of them. After about 3 days of reading the newly purchased book, it was finally finished. If she was being honest, the expectations for her teammates' book were low. I mean, how could they not be? The Naruto that she knew barely passed the academic portions of the academy. Or, at least, that was what she, the pink-haired girl, had assumed. Because wow, this book was good. In fact, good may have been an understatement. It was great. Not only was it well written, which was the biggest surprise of all, but it also made her feel some emotions that she hadn't been prepared to feel. Sakura was aware that Naruto had grown up all by himself, but not until now did she truly know what the boy had been going through all of these years. All of that was conveyed through the main character, Menma, which was a result of Naruto projecting himself into his work. I always saw him with that annoying large smile on his face. The Kunoichi thought with a twinge of sadness. I always just assumed he was happy, but he was just sad and lonely. She did her best to try and shake those sympathetic thoughts from her head. Naruto wouldn't want her to feel that way about him. After all, this wasn't a sad book about a despairing main character, it was a story of a man who gets all of the adversity in the world thrown at him, only for him to try his damnedest to overcome it and grow as a human. If anything, Sakura should be proud of Naruto, not sad for him. Never once had she heard the boy complain about anything in his life. Sure, he would sometimes get frustrated or upset when things didn't go his way, but that's natural for everyone. The truth was, her blonde teammate was one of the strongest people she had ever met. And Sakura wasn't talking about battle strength, though Naruto was very strong in that regard, too. No, character was the greatest strength he possessed. No matter what happened, who was in his way, or how hopeless the situation was, Naruto was going to give it everything he had. That was who Naruto Uzumaki was. She clenched her fist tightly, a new fire burning brightly behind those green eyes. I'm not going to let you get that far ahead of me, Naruto. I'm going to train my butt off today, and every day, with Tsunade-sama until you get back. Just you wait. Hinata. When the Hyuga heiress had learned that the boy she had always admired had come out with a book that she would be able to read, words could not describe how happy she was. She felt this way for many reasons. Not only did she want to support her fellow Leaf Ninja as much as she could, but reading something that was written by him also helped dull pain in her chest that had been intermittently present ever since the boy had left with Jiraiya of the Sannin. Hinata didn't know why the pain was there, but it would flare up whenever her mind drifted to thinking about Naruto. Most importantly, though, the novel allowed her to peer into the mind of its author. Not being much of a writer herself, it was still common knowledge that an author tends to show some of their thoughts and feelings through the work they create. In short, maybe reading this book would be able to help her be in tune with whatever her crush was feeling. Well, she read the whole thing. Quite quickly, in fact. After purchasing the novel, she rushed home back to the Hyuga compound and began reading immediately. Reading the entire day, then that entire night, she finished around lunchtime the following morning. Letting out a tired yawn, pale eyes were fixated on the cover of the book. It was just like him, very orange. Normally Hinata would have smiled, but conflicting feelings were getting in the way of it. The contents of the book were something she had not expected. From what she knew about Naruto, he was someone very strong and determined. Someone who, no matter what was in his way, he was going to fight tooth and nail to succeed. Hinata had seen him do it after all, at the first stage of the Chunin exams. Naruto did what he did best and didn't give up, and even though he didn't appear to notice, he inspired a lot of Chunin hopefuls to do the same thing that day. One of them was her. That is what had her so conflicted. Menma, the protagonist, was nothing like the Naruto she knew. At least, not at first. The main character was lonely, self-conscious, and emotionally wounded. 3 things that she would never associate with Naruto. Only later, after much struggling and self-reflection, did Menma begin to resemble the blonde boy Hinata had learned to admire so deeply. That's when the realization hit her. Having been so enthralled by the pristine perception of Naruto that she had, it never crossed her mind that this was what he was like before, and maybe still like, to some degree. Tears began forming in the corner of her lavender eyes as he began to think back to that cold day in the woods when those bullies were trying to pick on her. Naruto had saved her and had gotten beaten up badly in the process. Then, she had been dragged away unable to even so much as thank her savior. At that time, was he feeling the way Menma felt? Alone? Worthless? The possibility of that being true was tearing her up inside. If she had known back then, maybe she would have acted differently. Hinata hoped that that was the case, but she wasn't sure. Growing up shy and scared, the desire to get closer to Naruto was there. The girl could just never bring herself to do it no matter how hard she tried. It broke the heiress's heart that the boy she wanted nothing more than to stand at his side had been going through so much while she was too scared to even say, "Hi. I'm so pathetic." Harsh words echoed in the ears of the shy member of Team 8. "I don't quit, and I don't run." Since the Chunin exams, every time Hinata was scared to do something those words came back to her memory. Naruto's words. Shaking her head free of all of those negative thoughts, Hinata steeled herself. Naruto was due to come back in 2 years. That gave her 2 years to become better. And when it was time for the blonde to come back, she would be ready to be there for him if he needed it, and he would take notice of her. Neji, the cousin to the main branch's heiress, a slave to the household, Neji's interest in Naruto and his novel was quite different from that of Hinata and Sakura. Neji was one of the few geniuses of his generation. A prodigy in the way of the gentle fist art that would be considered very rare even among the elite of the main branch of the clan. Yet, he was bested in combat by someone who he had deemed as inferior to him. So sure of his victory, the blonde's devastating uppercut did more than discombobulate Neji's senses, it turned his entire world upside down. There were many things that the caged Hyuga wanted to ask his former opponent, though he never got the chance to do so before he had left the village with the indecent Sannin. Well, more accurately, Neji had no idea how to bring them up in conversation. They had interacted verbally a bit during their mission to retrieve Sasuke, but nothing far beyond simple conversation and things about the mission. If he was being honest with himself, he wasn't a very sociable person. Nor did he like to show emotion, which would make talking to Naruto very difficult given the things he wants to discuss. So, what better way than to try and communicate with him through the words that he writes? Perhaps it would answer those burning questions. No matter how many days had passed since the final round of the Chunin exams, there was one line that constantly resonated with the talented shinobi. You don't know what it's like to be branded with a mark that sets you apart. A mark that can never be wiped away. Oh yeah, I know what that's like. Well, big deal. Who cares? Initially, those words had infuriated Neji. It seemed as though Naruto was trying to minimize what he had gone through with the death of his father and the unfair state of his clan. Yet, after looking back on it, that didn't seem to be the case. What had he meant by that? And then, what was that chakra the blonde was able to bring forth despite having his chakra points blocked? Neji hypothesized that Naruto's mark that he said he also possessed and that swirling red chakra were somehow connected. After completing the novel, the Hyuga prodigy was even more sure of his theory than he had been before. The main character of the story was someone who was ostracized due to a power that he could not fully control. Having heard around the village, Naruto was not well received by many of the villagers, yet Neji hadn't heard why this was. Coupling this with the fact that this Menma grew and matured into someone who resembles Naruto in many ways, this could only make it even more likely that Naruto and the Hyuga are very alike. Both were branded with hideous marks that not only defined them but limited their possibilities. Or so, that was what he thought before clashing with the blonde. While Neji had been born with unmistakable talent, Naruto was not, and he still won. Immediately after the heated battle, the result dumbfounded Neji. How could he, the pride of the Leaf's most powerful clan, lose to someone with less talent and skill? Over time, after thinking about life and the words that were spoken to him on that day, he concluded. It was because Naruto refused to be bound by what was supposed to be his fate. By not accepting it, and choosing to fight past it, the boy had exceeded his limits and potential. It almost didn't seem real and went against the Hyuga boy's deeply entrenched beliefs about life and reality. Yet, it still made him believe that it was possible. Naruto inspired him to continue moving forward no matter what, and this book was just a projection of all the things that the blonde had unintentionally taught him. Neji unceremoniously cracked a smile. One day, the Hyuga branches would join together to form one clan. Then, and only then, will the curse mark of the branch families disappear for good and fade into history. Using Naruto's teachings, Neji would ensure that this happens. Tsunade. Tsunade grunted in a mix of annoyance and anger as she eyed the old badger sitting on the other side of the large Hokage desk. The last few days had been an absolute mess. After receiving the message from her childhood friend and teammate about the recent events in both Wave and the Land of Hot Water, she had been worried sick about the little genin. The only silver lining to the whole situation was that Naruto was safe and sound. Well, from what Jiraiya had said, physically safe. Mentally, that was a matter that had still yet to be determined, but she was praying that Naruto would come out of all of this no worse for wear. Now, while that whole situation was bad enough, there was also the matter of dealing with the person who was currently invading her personal space. For the last time. Tsunade's voice was its usual strict and firm tone. Even if I ordered Jiraiya to come back, he wouldn't. His job is to train the boy, and he can't do that when they are both in the village. We rely on Jiraiya too much when he's here, they wouldn't be able to accomplish anything. How many times did she have to say it before he would understand? This is ridiculous, Princess Tsunade. You are the Hokage. Act like it for once and order your subordinate to return to the village at once. Danzo demanded, despite not having the actual power to do so. From what Jiraiya told me, he and Naruto are safe in Empty Mayaboku and are planning on staying there for a majority of the time they have left before they are due back in the village. The slug princess's tone was getting harsher and harsher as this conversation continued. That should be acceptable, even for you. No, that is not good enough. The boy must be here in the village where we can watch him and make sure he does not get into trouble. Jiraiya has shown that he is incapable of ensuring the Jinchuriki's safety. I would do a much better job if I was just given the opportunity. This would not do. Not at all. If he had the seat of Hokage, the state of the village would be far better than it currently was. The other nations were beginning to view the leaf as a weaker version of its former self. These perceptions invite conflict as the other countries vie to be at the top of the world. If only Tsunade realized that and gave up the seat to him willingly. Then, the village's most valuable asset would be safe and locked in a cage like it should be, thus helping them maintain their spot as the supreme ninja village. Jiraiya is one of the Sannin, and currently the strongest ninja we have. If anyone could keep Naruto safe, it is him. That remains to be seen. Jiraiya is the reason Naruto isn't in the hands of the Akatsuki, and it is not from a lack of trying. Danzo would be hard-pressed to argue with that. There were now 2 times when an Akatsuki duo tried to take the nine-tailed fox, and both were foiled by the presence of the toad sage. Though, one of those instances involved Itachi. The old badger sneered. He couldn't tell Tsunade about why the encounter with Itachi had less merit. Only 3 people know about that, and there was no way he was going to let more people in on that dark little secret. He had no choice but to relent for now. And, Danzo. This information, it is classified, it will not leave this room. The beautiful Senju's voice promised punishment if her words were ignored. Fine. The annoyance in his voice was palpable. Just know this, Princess Tsunade, if that boy falls into the hands of the Akatsuki, the world as we know it is doomed. So, you had better hope that fool Jiraiya knows what he's doing. Before the 5th Hokage could even respond, Danzo lifted himself off of the chair with his trusty cane and made his way for the door. Yet, suddenly, he stopped and turned around. From this position, he could see the entire office that always belonged to the incumbent Hokage. Even though Tsunade currently resided in that seat, he could see himself in her place. A faint smile adorning his wrinkled lips, the bandaged man closed the door behind him as he left. The female Sannin let out a deep, frustrated sigh. First, there had been stacks of paperwork that had to be dealt with. The annoying badger had to come in with his monthly power struggle that was beginning to grow tiresome. Though, this was one of the few times where Danzo had made some good points. If she didn't have the utmost respect and love for both Jiraiya and Naruto, perhaps Shimura's request would have been considered. "I need a drink." Muttering absent-mindedly to herself, she glanced at the orange book that was laying on the far right corner of her desk. Tsunade had been excited to read the book by her adoptive grandson, but there just wasn't enough time. Especially considering everything that had just happened, there wasn't enough time in the day to get everything done. What was it about? That was what made her so curious. The similarities the blonde had to Nawaki and Dan were probably what made her the most interested. Maybe she would see a little bit of them in it. Who knew? Tsunade-sama. Shizune said loudly as she walked through the door with a large stack of paper in her hands. All of these need to be completed by the end of the day. Her smile was a mask to hide her nervousness because she that the Hokage was already in a bad mood after meeting with the Leaf Village's leader of Root. More paperwork was just adding fuel to the fire. Tsunade's eyes drifted slowly from the book to her student, ushering her forward. She watched as Shizune plopped the papers down in front of her. Another sigh escaping the lips of the Sannin. "Hopefully, I'll have time to start reading it tomorrow." She mused, though with little confidence that it was possible. Chapter 13, Great Lord Elder. -24 months before returning to the village, Naruto gritted his teeth, struggling to maintain the violent spinning orb in his hand. The energy it gave off made his wild hair swirl in several directions in a similar fashion a large gust of wind would do. Sweat beads pooled at the temple until they were too large, gravity taking care of the rest as they rolled down the sides of his face. Weeks of practice were beginning to pay off, every day it was getting easier to use the Rasengan with one hand. Just a few moments ago, the blonde had dispelled all of the clones who had been training hard the entire day. After taking in their experience, it was time to see what progress had been made. Jiraiya smirked, happy with the boy's continuous advancement. "That's it, Naruto. Maintain that power without losing control." Naruto heard him, but couldn't even nod his head in response. Doing so would cause him to lose focus and, well, he had made that mistake sometime last week and the result was painful. The goal of this training was to hold the completed jutsu for at least 20 seconds, and if he could do that, then they would see what kind of damage it would inflict on the surrounding landscape. 20 seconds had just been reached. "Now, kid." Once he was given the signal, the Jinchuriki slammed the Rasengan into one of the taller nearby mushroom trees. There was a loud screeching sound, as the violent chakra began to shred through the flesh of the mushroom as if it were warm butter. Naruto grimaced, beads of sweat were how dripping freely off his chin. When a clone was used to help make the Rasengan, it took a lot of stress off of the boy. Coupled with the fact that he never used to hold the chakra in his hand for an extended period of time even in combat, meant that every step of this training was harder than when he first learned the technique. After moments of carnage, the mushroom tree had had enough. Naruto had ripped through a lot of its trunk. Without a stable base to keep itself upright, the tree began to creak and groan, the force of the jutsu pushing it backward. It slowly fell, finally collapsing with a loud crash. Jiraiya clapped loudly in celebration. "Great job. That was the real deal." Naruto looked at his burned hand, not entirely satisfied with his performance. "I guess. It's just that, I'm still not even close to being able to use it in battle like that. If I lose my concentration for even a second, it will blow up in my face." Jiraiya put his hand on top of Naruto's head and ruffled his hair affectionately. "Yeah, but you can't deny the progress that you've made already. I told you before, this is not an easy jutsu to master. It takes time, but at the rate you're going, you'll be the quickest person to have ever mastered it." The genin's face scrunched up in annoyance at the man's words. "Yeah, but that isn't saying much. I'm only the third person to learn it." Jiraiya shook his head, surprising the blonde. Instead of using words, he just held up 4 fingers. "What do you mean? Who's the fourth?" "The fourth Hokage, Jiraiya, himself, and Kakashi," was the Sannin's one-word response. Naruto's eyes widened in shock. "What? Even Kakashi-sensei knows it? Why did he never tell me that?" Jiraiya chuckled. "You shouldn't be surprised. Not only is Kakashi called the copy ninja who has copied over 1,000 techniques, but he was also a student of the fourth Hokage." Even with that explanation, Kakashi knowing, and being able to do the Rasengan even better than him, didn't sit right with the blonde. Even though he was called the copy ninja, the Sharingan didn't help him learn a jutsu that didn't use hand signs. Noticing this, Jiraiya interceded. Don't worry about that, Naruto. As I said, you might be able to master this technique faster than myself, Kakashi, and the fourth Hokage. That is some pretty good company to be in if I do say so myself. That made Naruto smile slightly. That was fantastic company to be in. They were three of the strongest ninja the village had ever produced, and he was on par with them when learning a technique. I guess you're right. Thanks, sensei. There was just one small thing that didn't make sense. If he knows such a powerful jutsu, how come I've never seen him use it in a fight? It was a very strong technique, after all. Why not use it? Well, that's a matter of preference. Jiraiya explained, he said with a wave of the hand. The Sannin always did like to convey dialogue with unnecessary hand gestures. Kakashi saw the fourth's Rasengan and modeled his lightning blade after it. It is very similar to the Rasengan, though it lacks the severe level of rotation our jutsu requires. Then, Kakashi combined this result with his lightning nature manipulation, creating a deadly jutsu that is perfect for assassinations. Naruto's face scrunched up. Well, why didn't he just add his lightning to the Rasengan, to begin with? Why go through all of the trouble of creating an entirely different technique? Ah! Jiraiya nodded knowingly, a smirk appearing on his face. That answer is simple, he couldn't. A look of surprise appeared on the blonde's face. This is Kakashi-sensei we're talking about here. What do you mean he couldn't? Jiraiya's face lifted up into a bittersweet smile in remembrance of his late, great student. Instead of answering the traditional way, he held up his palm and created a Rasengan of his own. Though, now it was the Sannin's turn to have a look of strain overcome his features. His hand began to shake violently from the effort, and Naruto could notice that the attack was beginning to change slightly in a way he had never seen before. The usually blue jutsu began to change to a slightly more reddish-orange color, and sparks of fire began to appear around the orb. Though, the orb began to vibrate at a dangerously high frequency, as if it was about to explode. Alas, the effort was too much for Jiraiya, and he had to dissipate the technique before it detonated. Despite the failure, Naruto's eyes were sparkling in awe. Wow, what was that? Jiraiya, now breathing a little heavy, wiped the sweat that was now dripping down the side of his face. That was my best attempt to incorporate my fire release into the Rasengan. As you can see, even for me, it's unbelievably difficult. I've tried to do it for over a decade, but with no luck. I almost think that it's impossible. The genin nodded slowly, doing his best to take in all of this new information. But why is it so difficult to add your fire to the Rasengan, but easier for sensei to create the lightning blade? What was the difference, he wondered. Rotation. Jiraiya began simply. The Rasengan is the highest attainable level of change in chakra form possible in the current known world of ninjutsu. Change in chakra form? Naruto wondered aloud. Change in form is essentially molding your chakra into whatever shape you want it to be. The form of chakra determines a technique's size, range, and purpose. And the Rasengan is the most extreme version of this, meaning that, by itself, it is already an incredibly difficult jutsu to master. A rank, in fact. To then have to add nature manipulation into the mix, that would make the resulting technique S rank, no, probably even higher than that. Naruto's eyes widened at a sudden realization. That means... He began, looking down at his right hand. That the fourth's Rasengan is an incomplete technique? The Toad Sage nodded. That's right. Not even the fourth Hokage, the genius of the last several generations, could add his elemental chakra to the Rasengan. The boy couldn't believe it. From what he learned in the academy, the fourth Hokage was perhaps the greatest genius the village ever produced. He practically ended the third great ninja war by himself. Yet, even he couldn't finish his technique. Why are you telling me all of this? Jiraiya smiled widely. Because, kid, if there is anyone who can complete this jutsu, I think it's you. What? No way. I can't even master the base technique. There's no way I can do that. I mean, if someone like the fourth couldn't do it, what are the chances that a loser like me could do it? You are far from a loser, kid. You're learning the jutsu much faster than I ever did, and I'm one of the Sannin. I'm not sure that it's possible to complete it, but we're going to cross that bridge when we get to it. Once you have the Rasengan fully mastered, we'll move on to even bigger fish. The praise the blonde received from his master always made him feel a lot better. Not getting much of it growing up, he didn't realize how much he had longed for it until he finally received it. Though, he wasn't going to let it go to his head. His mentor believed in him, and there was no way he would let him down. The two began to walk back into the residential area of the mountain. They passed a bushel of bright purple and green flowers, something the genin never thought would have existed naturally. This place continued to surprise him with how it differed from the land of fire. The array of bright colors had initially been giving him headaches. The different scenery and plant life in Mount Myaboku were taking a little getting used to, but Naruto felt he was adapting to it. His thoughts drifted back to what his godfather had said. He didn't like to let people down, and if Jiraiya truly had that much faith in him, the boy was going to try his damnedest to realize it. Naruto's eyes began to sparkle, and to Jiraiya, it looked just like when he first showed his godson what the Rasengan was. A sense of relief washed over him that he could barely fathom. Maybe jumping back into training so quickly after the wave tragedy was the best choice to make. While it was clear the kid was still in great pain, training was always something that lifted his spirits. The sage was tired of making constant mistakes regarding the blonde. Now, Jiraiya hoped, he was finally on the right track, being the positive role model the fourth son truly needed. A noise broke him from his thoughts. Glancing back down, he saw that his student was walking alongside him, blue chakra swirling in hand. "What are you doing, kid?" His voice laced with uncertainty. Naruto's face broke out into a wide smile. "Well, if my master believes in me, I can't just let him down. As you said, it's going to take a lot of practice. That means I'm going to practice whenever I can." "Oh. And what benefit does this kind of training have?" The Toad Sage asked with a hint of humor. "If I can maintain this while I walk home, it splits up my concentration. In a fight, I can't take my eyes off of my opponent to focus completely on my attack. It'll help me get used to dividing up my attention." Jiraiya smirked. The kid's methods weren't perfect, but that wasn't a bad thought. That gave him an idea. "Not bad, kid. From now on, every day on our walks home from training, I want you to conjure up a couple clones and you can all practice the Rasengan while walking. That way you'll get even more practice in." Naruto's jaw dropped. How had he not thought of something so simple? "That's a great idea, sensei." There he went, losing focus again. Boom! Jiraiya coughed, accidentally inhaling some of the dust that got kicked up from his godson's antics. Normally, he would be annoyed by this, but the kid comically spread out on the ground from the force of the explosion kept him in good spirit. "Get the hell up, Gaki." While the Toad Sage was doing his best to make sure Naruto knew that he believed in him, that was still lofty praise the boy now had to live up to. A 13-year-old child, whom was referred to as a loser and failure his entire life, was now told that he had the ability to go beyond something that the fourth Hokage could not. Though neither of them realized it at the time due to their good spirits, it was just another weight that was piled on the Jinchuriki's back. Jiraiya sighed softly as he leaned in against the side of Ma and Pa's house. The four of them had just finished eating about an hour ago, and Naruto had headed off to bed saying something along the lines of getting up really early to get some extra training in. Jiraiya had been monitoring the boy and his seal closely recently, and to his surprise, there appeared to be no residue of the fox's chakra around it. Meaning that, even though Naruto had seen his friends dead, the fox did not try and take advantage of this and push some of his chakra between the cracks of the cell doors. He could be overthinking it, but it was something to keep an eye on, nonetheless. The sound of hopping broke the sage from his thoughts. It was Lord Fukasaku. "Boss?" His student began with a questioning gaze, curious as to what the small frog wanted. "That boy. Talking of Naruto. He seems to be progressing very quickly." Jiraiya allowed himself a smile at the indirect compliment. After all, he was the teacher, and if his student was making rapid improvements, that means the job was being done right. "Yeah, that kid never ceases to amaze me. Despite everything that has happened recently, he is as determined as he always is." Fukasaku nodded knowingly. Jiraiya had filled in the details of what it was that happened a few days after they arrived in Mount Myaboku. Ma and Pa had been mortified that these Akatsuki would do something so horrible to so many innocent people. Not only that, but their hearts went out to the young blonde. Even if he was a ninja, someone his age should never have to go through the things he has experienced. The Sannin hadn't been lying when he said there was a lot on the boy's plate. "Well, that was kind of what I wanted to talk to you about." Jiraiya's brow furrowed as he used his back to push himself off of the side of the house. Oh. And what did you want to talk about, exactly? These Akatsuki. They seem like an incredibly dangerous group of people. Strong, too. The green toad's eyes were fierce, his white mohawk waving around in the Mount Mayaboku winds. Being the Jinchuriki for the nine-tailed fox, Naruto boy is going to have to get very powerful very quickly if he hopes to stand a chance against this threat. Crossing his arms around his chest in a subconscious decision to go on the defensive, Jiraiya eyed his master, wearing a confused look on his face. He didn't know what his master was trying to get at. Well, yeah. That's why we're here, and that's why I'm pushing Naruto so hard. The kid is making fantastic progress. But will it be enough? What are you trying to say, boss? Fukasaku smirked. I can sense Naruto boy's chakra, his reserves are enormous for a child his age. No doubt in my mind it's because of that Uzumaki blood, along with being a Jinchuriki. Jiraiya's eyes widened, tightening the grip of his arms even further. You're not implying that we should teach the boy sage mode. Fukasaku finished, balling his fist up tightly in excitement. As much as Jiraiya wanted to say yes to that idea, he couldn't. I can't. He's not ready. Tone even, but firm. The Toad Sage's master recoiled a bit, surprised by his protégé's words. He knew his student well, and that response was very unlike him. But, Jiraiya boy, those monsters aren't going to go easy on him. If he isn't strong enough, he'll die. The Sannin shook his head reluctantly. I know they won't, but before I teach him something like Sage Mode, I have to be sure that he is a real ninja first. Sage Mode augments one's genjutsu, ninjutsu, and taijutsu to even higher levels. If his skills are lacking in those areas, then Sage Mode won't be used to its fullest capacity. I love Naruto, but he is impatient and lacks discipline, which is to be expected of someone his age. As he is right now, a 13-year-old boy, he might be incapable of learning the intricacies of natural energy. Fukasaku attempted to speak, but Jiraiya wasn't done yet. And if he is incompatible right now, all of that precious time and effort of senjutsu training would bear no fruit. I've only got 2 years left, they have to count. For once, I am going to go the safe route and continue to do what we've been doing. His improvements are obvious, after all. The great sage of Mount Mayaboku wanted to argue, but his student made a lot of good points. It was quick, but Pa had already begun to care for the young genin. It was clear that he looked almost exactly like Minato, but he also acted quite a bit like Jiraiya when he was younger. Perhaps those feelings were clouding his judgment. I see. And besides. Jiraiya breathed in deep, then exhaled loudly. He has been, and is still going to, work extremely hard, but I don't want to run him into the ground. I read the book he wrote, and well, Naruto may not show it, but the amount of stress he is feeling is something that a kid shouldn't be able to handle. I worry that if work him too hard, especially after what happened in Wave, it'll cause irreparable damage. Sage training is grueling. Though Naruto seemed to be doing better, the sage wasn't totally convinced. If he accidentally reopened wounds, there was a chance that they would never truly heal. Fukasaku let out a deep breath, as well. He hadn't realized how delicate a situation this was. In the end, he would defer to the judgment of his Sannin student. Okay, Jiraiya boy. I think you're right. Jiraiya grimaced. I hope so, boss. Jiraiya. Both sages turned their heads in the direction of the noise. The young little toad whose name escaped the Sannin was hopping over towards them. It really has been a long time since I've visited. What is it? He asked. The great Lord Elder, he wishes to see you. Master and student shared a surprised glance. Though Jiraiya had been hoping to gain an audience with the Elder eventually, he didn't expect to be called for by the old toad himself. Whatever it was, it must be important. Jiraiya nodded and followed the toad with Fukasaku hopping quickly behind them. The toad sage of the leaf walked into a very large, but familiar room. The back wall was lined with an abundance of enormous scrolls. In the center of the room, sat the great Lord Elder, in what almost looked like a massive throne that had the symbol for Sage on it. In reality, it was just a spot where he could rest in a puddle of water large enough to keep him cool and hydrated. As for the old toad himself, he had to have been as large as Gamabunta, possibly even bigger than that. Wrinkly skin was mostly brown, aside from his white belly. The wise sage wore a square-shaped professor's hat with tassels on each corner and an orb similar to the one the third Hokage had used on top of it. A necklace was hanging from his neck, the kanji for oil written on it. Though those large eyes were nearly squinted shut, he could still see because the moment Jiraiya walked in his face lifted up into a small smile. Finally, before the most respected toad of Mount Myaboku, Jiraiya got down on one knee. "Great Lord Elder." The Sannin began respectfully. "You called for me?" The toad cocked his head to the side, seemingly studying the middle-aged man in front of him. After a few moments of this, the oldest sage finally spoke. "Who are you?" Jiraiya and Fukasaku's sweat dropped at the doddering toad but recovered quickly. "It is me, Jiraiya. I was told that you had something to tell me." Though appearing to think this statement over, Gamamaru was really internally laughing. The great sage wasn't some senile old frog, he was just so bored sitting around all day and loved messing with people more than anything. It truly was the best way to pass the time. Plus, seeing the look on the faces of those who revered him always kept his spirits up. Having enough fun, he feigned a thoughtful look on his face and spoke. "Ah yes, I remember you now. You, who are singularly pervy, I have called for you because I have had an important vision that I wish to impart on you." "What?" Jiraiya completely ignored the shot at his depraved behaviors. A new vision was not what he had been expecting. "What did you see?" Once again, the giant toad thought for a moment. This time, actually trying to recall what he saw to the best of his ability. These visions, they come and go so fast, similar to a dream. The second they happen most of it is forgotten. There will come a time, where someone you know is going to go through great emotional turmoil. The toad croaked out slowly. You will be presented with a choice which will determine how they cope. Choose wisely. Naruto immediately flashed through his mind. When the toad mentioned emotional turmoil, there was no one else who he knew that it could possibly be. Jiraiya was trying to think of scenarios in which this vision made sense. Yet, Naruto seemed to be getting better, right? Why was the great elder mentioning this now if it was already in the past? The timing seemed a bit off. Unless Naruto isn't really getting better at all. Now that he thought about it, every once in a while, he would see the kid frown for a split second, as if he was trying to hide his actual emotions. This was something that definitely needed to get looked into. Jiraiya, done with the inward thought, looked back up at the Honorable Toad. "Is that the crucial selection that you told me about all those years ago?" he asked, referencing the prophecy the elder gave him before the Third Great Ninja War. Gamamaru opened his always half-shut eyes, seemingly staring into the soul of the Toad Sage. The average person would be overwhelmed by this gaze, but the Sannin stood firm. "That, I do not know," was all he said in response. It would be too easy to have all the answers. "Okay. Thank you." Jiraiya stood up and bowed deeply. There were a lot of things he needed to think about. For the longest time, the crucial selection had loomed over his head. Every time something bad happened to one of his students, that prophecy came to the forefront of his mind. Was that it? Had he made the wrong choice? When news broke that Minato died in the Ninetales attack, all Jiraiya could think about was his choice of leaving the village. Would his student have lived if he stayed in the leaf? Did he fail the entire world? These thoughts have cursed the Sannin for decades. Now, he had what you could call a potential second crucial selection. On the bright side, there is more that is known about this choice that he will have to make. Yet, that doesn't make the situation any less stressful. Naruto was sitting up in his bedroll, his normally vibrant blue eyes were dead, empty, and heavy. For the past few weeks, the prospect of going to bed early was a wise one. More sleep equals higher brain and body function, which leads to better performance and quicker results. Though, that only helped if one can fall asleep. Naruto may occasionally pass out from complete exhaustion, but he hasn't gotten more than a couple hours of sleep at night since, well, you know. Every time the boy closes his eyes, all that appears is Tsunade's severed head, or Inari's screams, or Tsunami's blood running down the normally clean kitchen tiles of their house. During the day it could be manageable. Jiraiya was always having him do something that was mentally or physically engaging, so distractions were easy to come by. Sure, sometimes he would remember things and get sad, but that was to be expected. Still, the blonde did his best to hide it from everyone. It was at night when the Jinchuriki was alone with just his thoughts, that was when it was truly unbearable. It is hard to escape your demons when there is nothing to distract you. The thought of being responsible for their deaths resurfaced. If he never went to Wave, then the Akatsuki likely wouldn't have gone there either. Logic dictates they would still be alive, right? There were even times where Naruto questioned whether or not he wanted to be alive. He would gladly exchange his life for theirs back, in a heartbeat, but it was deeper than that. All of this pressure and pain, sometimes it just seemed like too much to bear. These feelings weren't going to go away, either. So, maybe it would just be easier to die. No pain, no weight to bear, no getting other people caught in the crossfire. All of that and the Akatsuki's plan would be ruined or at least set back several years before the Ninetales reappears. It was a good thought, but if that happened, he wouldn't be around to protect those remaining precious people. If it was the last thing he did, it would be to ensure their safety. These were all the things the author was struggling with. No one could know. If they found out, maybe they would halt the training. The training that he needed to. He clutched his head, a headache causing him to get confused. What did he need all of that strength for again? Drip. 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 Inside the cave, there were 9 ghastly figures standing in a large circle. Though they were just projections, the malice radiating from them would weigh down even a seasoned jonin. Akatsuki. These 9 shinobi don't meet very often, so when they did it was usually to discuss something of importance. Though, something about this instance felt odd. From what Itachi had understood, all of them weren't supposed to be together again for another 2 years. If one of the pairs was to be given a mission, it was through the isolated contact of their leader, or Zetsu. Something must have happened. I don't see why we always have to meet in caves. Haydn huffed. I'm not saying we should all go to a hot spring, but something less depressing would be great. Shut up, Haydn. Kakuzu growled. We're here to discuss important business, so stop wasting time. Before the silver-haired psychopath could respond, another voice cut in. Look at those two, my man. They sound like an old married couple, HM. The man's voice was relatively deep, and his tone was mocking. Not much of his appearance could be determined through the astral projection, but the mystery Akatsuki member seemed to have long sweeping bangs that covered most of his face. His partner appeared to be much shorter and hunched over to such a degree that it looked uncomfortable. HM. Based on the gruff grunt, seems like the one referred to as my man was not much of a talker. As much as I love to watch these two zombies squabble, I hope that's not why we were all called here like this. The familiar voice of Kisame, Itachi's partner, chimed in humorlessly. The scaly shinobi turned his attention to their leader, Pain. What is there to discuss? I thought we wouldn't meet like this again for a couple more years. Now everyone's attention, even the two that always seemed to be arguing, were trained on the projection of their leader. What could be so important that an emergency meeting would be called? We are all a part of this organization, so I thought I would inform all of those who didn't know about what was going on. Itachi's eyes narrowed so slightly that it was imperceptible to all those around him. Whatever this new information was, he was not aware of it. For once, the raven-haired Uchiha was in the dark. Haydn and Kakuzu attempted to carry out a mission to capture the Ninetales. Pain continued, what he said caught the attention of most of the Akatsuki members. What of the Sannin, Jiraiya? Itachi was the first to speak. The monotonous tone in his voice made his motives unreadable. From what I understood, he was keeping watch over the Ninetales. There was a plan in place to separate the Jinchuriki from him. Kakuzu began, the growl in his voice made it clear that the bounty hunter was still mad that his prizes had gotten away. And it almost worked, too. Haydn interceded. But that guy whose leg I cut off ratted us out. He turned to Kakuzu, anger evident in his eyes. I told you that I should have killed him. We would have that damn Jinchuriki if it weren't for you. His partner grunted but said nothing in response. As much as he hated to admit it, that idiot partner of his was right for once. At the time, Kakuzu just didn't want to attract more attention. The longer they were there, and the more noise they made, the chances that others would have seen them increased dramatically. If new witnesses saw them, there was a chance they'd have to slaughter that entire village. That would have almost assuredly alerted the Sannin of the Leaf. While it was a failure, that does not mean we haven't gained anything. Their ripple-eyed leader continued. We have acquired some very important information regarding one of the inhabitants of the Leaf Village. Oh. The one with the gruff voice questioned with something that appeared to be a tail swinging menacingly behind his hunched-over form. What might that be? The leaf appears to have someone who can use the wood release. The tail that was once lashing about angrily stopped in its tracks. As did everyone else who had not previously been privy to that information. After all, only one man in the known ninja world had ever been in possession of the wood release. That man was perhaps the strongest shinobi in recorded history, the first Hokage, Hashirama Senju. Interestingly enough, Itachi's face had no visible reaction. His eyes were closed, indicating his indifference to the information. I don't see what the big deal is. Hayden's rude voice cut through the tension that had seeped its way into the cold, dark cave. He was a weakling. If that spiky-haired old man hadn't shown up, the wood guy would have been toast. Literally. That's not the point, you idiot. The masked Akatsuki member berated his partner. Wood style has the ability to control tailed beasts. I have seen the first Hokage do it with my own eyes. Indicating that Kakuzu was old enough to see the first Hokage in action. Pain nodded in agreeance. No matter the strength level of this shinobi, those abilities are no laughing matter. That individual is someone we must be wary of. And, if the opportunity arises, capture him alive for our own uses. At least you two simpletons gain something from your botched capture, HM. If it were us, the nine tails would be tied up at our feet already. That wasn't the only thing that we gained. Black Zetsu, who was not currently being accompanied by his white half, had been silently observing the entire time, made his presence known. Pain gave Black Zetsu a look the others couldn't decipher. What do you mean? HM. That will be discussed at a later date. Their ominous leader said vaguely. As it stands right now, we must be more cautious than usual. After our failed attempt in the land of waves, the villages, mainly the Leaf, may decide to take more interest in our activities. Are you saying we should go dark? One of the 7 ninja swordsmen asked. Doing that would set their schedule back considerably. I'm not saying that. Be more cautious, don't do things that have the chance to attract attention. We can't have the nations breathing down our necks before our operations even begin. It might be hard to get money. Kakuzu grunted his objection to this plan. Pain glanced in the bounty hunter's direction, but the words he spoke were aimed at all 8 remaining members of the Akatsuki. If our operations are pushed back a little bit, then that is a small consequence that we were willing to take to get the 9 tails early. Though, if done right, it shouldn't affect us all that much. The cave was now silent, the other members mulling over the words of their leader. The usually stoic Uchiha seemed to have a very slight pained expression on his face. As if he wanted to say something, but resigned to holding his tongue. Are we clear? There were no objections. Good. Dismissed. As the projections began to disappear, the leader seemed to remember something. Sasori. Eyes trained on the one with the hunched back. Stay a moment, we have something to discuss. The now named Sasori grunted, but obliged and stayed behind. Itachi, though he didn't appear to be paying attention, was interested in this. Waiting as long as he could before leaving, when the projection of one of the last Uchiha finally faded, there were only 3 remaining. Pain, Sasori, and Black Zetsu. Minus 18 months before returning to the village. Is this the choice the Great Lord Elder was talking about? Jiraiya asked himself as he looked down at an open scroll that Kosuke had just delivered to him. Through the use of the expansive spy network, they had been able to learn a bit about the wave incident. Not about the Akatsuki, no, this was a bit more of a personal matter. There was only one thing to decide. What to do with this information. Damn it. The sage looked up, eyes trained on the focus of his decision. Why? Why? Why can't I do it? Naruto yelled out in a frustrated spell of emotions that were becoming more common with the young boy. He had been making such good progress since Jiraiya promised him intense training after winning their bet. At that time, every day felt like an improvement. A little bit faster, a little bit stronger. Yet, now, almost nothing. It had been a little over 6 months and barely any progress was being made. In his taijutsu training, Naruto was having difficulty focusing, leading to sloppy form and poor reaction time. The clone opponents had little difficulty winning the sessions most days. As for weighted training, his body wasn't responding to increases in weight like it used to. It took much longer to get used to increases, much to the frustration of the genin. Before, it seemed like they were increasing the weights every other week. Now, he doesn't even remember the last time Jiraiya increased it in any significant way. Most frustrating of all, it was the ninjutsu that was really bothering the Sannin student. Despite all of the praise Jiraiya had given the boy about his progress 6 months ago, his Rasengan was still incomplete. The prospect of letting down his godfather when so much was expected, was infuriating. At first, Jiraiya tried to reassure the blonde that they had simply hit a plateau in the training. Everyone hits these, he said. Nothing to worry about. Though, Naruto knew better than this. Something was wrong. Naruto also knew it wasn't the training. After all, this training proved to be effective by the results they were initially getting. It was something else. After a considerable amount of time had passed, Jiraiya too began to suspect that it was more than just a simple plateau. Ramping up the intensity didn't break through the stagnation, it only served to injure the blonde's back. Though, with his recuperative powers, Naruto was only sidelined for 2 days. One day would have probably been sufficient, but the sage just wanted to be sure. Nothing they had tried seemed to be working. Switching up the routine with different exercises and drills made no discernible difference. Taking a week off to rest only led to the blonde being a tad rusty when he started up again. It was to the point both of them were beginning to grow irritable about this new development. Jiraiya had trained many ninjas, all of which had hit plateaus at some point. However, none of those seemed to be like this. Then the words of the great Lord Elder came back. There will come a time, where someone you know is going to go through great emotional turmoil. You will be presented with a choice which will determine how they cope. Choose wisely. I think I know what you meant, great Lord Elder. Naruto, completely unaware of his master's thoughts, was too busy staring at shaky hands to notice. These past few months had been absolute hell. Not only has he been unable to sleep soundly at night for over half a year, but there was also dealing with his inability to advance in training. Could those two things somehow be related? Naruto shook his head, dispelling the absurdity that something like that could be true. Sure, sleeping was important, and he might not be getting as much as a young boy should, but that shouldn't be affecting their training in any significant way. It had to be something else. Being a failure who can't even save his close people, it's no wonder I'm failing at this too. His thoughts lately had become very self-deprecating and pessimistic. The more Naruto struggled in getting stronger, the angrier he became. It was to the point where angry outbursts were becoming an everyday occurrence. Naruto, said boy took in a deep breath, composed himself, and turned towards the sage. Yes, sensei. Voice betraying no negative emotions. Almost, at least. Jiraiya eyed his student. At first, this kind of odd behavior had been getting past him, but it was becoming more and more obvious that Naruto was holding in a lot of repressed emotions that were now spilling out. You can only hold back overflowing water so long until the dam eventually bursts. How are you feeling? Eyes scanning the boy, not for a response, but for any discernible change in body language. Lies were easy, but the body and eyes often betrayed those words. The blonde internally cringed. Should he finally tell him? Would their training stop? That couldn't happen, they would find a way to get past this stagnation eventually. That wouldn't happen at all if Jiraiya made him stop altogether. No, I'm fine. Why? That was the same response his godson gave every time that question was presented. No matter how hard the Sannin pressed the child about his feelings, it never changed. He was lying through his teeth, and Jiraiya knew it. But calling the boy out on would do little good in this situation. Besides, he had an idea that might help the child get past this. At least, to some extent. A way to cope. My spies have uncovered a piece of very important information. Jiraiya vaguely started. This caught his student's attention ever so slightly. What kind of information? This was odd, the Toad Sage never disclosed information from his spy network to Naruto. What could this be about? It's about what happened in the Land of Waves. Before the Sannin's very eyes, the boy's demeanor completely changed. The facade of being a seemingly normal, sometimes emotional teenager was replaced by hardened and angry eyes. Though Jiraiya wasn't aware of it, this happened every night when the genin was left alone with only his thoughts. Memories he wished he could forget flashed through his eyes, the very things that kept him up at night. The simple mention of the place where it happened was enough to do that. Jiraiya decided to continue, sparing the genin any more suspense. That look on the kid's face was unsettling, but this might be the only way to make things better. At least, that was what he hoped. He hated seeing the kid like this, it ate away at him. This was not about saving a prophecy to the Toad Sage, this was about helping his only family get past tragedy. Tsunade's bounty, we now know who placed it, and where he is. Chapter 14, My Way of the Ninja. Kakashi, once again, was out spending the majority of his day in front of the memorial stone. Besides going on dangerous missions, this took up the bulk of his life the past year. How the copy ninja missed the days when he was directing his cute little genin squad around. Watching them pull weeds, catch the mischievous cat Tora, painting fences. Oh, how those were the good old days. Now, with all of his downtime, the copy ninja was alone with his thoughts for most of the day. Somewhere he really did not want to be. From his own genin team, to the genin team he mentored, his life was really nothing but miserable failures, wasn't it? Arriving late at the Valley of the End and not seeing Sasuke anywhere, praying that they had knocked each other out, and he was laying somewhere nearby. Yet, that wasn't to be true. The reality of it ate away at the Jonin every day. Maybe if he had gone a little bit faster, Team 7 would still be together. Though, even then that was probably a pipe dream. Had Sasuke been forced to return to the Leaf against his will, it wouldn't have been pretty for anyone involved. The kid wouldn't just be okay with being permanently confined to the village. The mouth on that boy, Kakashi could imagine him shouting every obscenity in the world, threatening the lives of his fellow ninja. That was how much killing Itachi meant to the raven-haired youth. Ah well, that isn't really something to dwell on. He's gone. So is the little blonde squirt that always talked about being Hokage. Though, he was gone for many different reasons. Naruto's goal was to get strong enough to bring back his friend from the clutches of Orochimaru. Powerful enough to stand on equal terms with the rogue Uchiha to help him see reason. Still, Kakashi wished the hyperactive knucklehead was currently running through the streets of the village. As much as his teacher hated to admit it, it made the day more enjoyable. As for his third student, Kakashi-sensei, said man turned his head to see the little pink-haired girl running in his direction. Sakura. Slightly confused that the girl was here. Don't you have training with Tsunade this day of the week? Sakura, whose breath was a tad labored from running across most of the village to find the copy ninja, nodded her head swiftly. That's what I wanted to talk to you about. I switched my schedule around with Lady Tsunade. Today is your day off, right? The Jonin was now giving Sakura his full attention, something that had been reserved for the stone memorial. Yes. Why, do you need something? Always ready to help out his students. I want you to train me. There was a sparkle in the young girl's eyes. A sparkle that resembled a certain blonde-haired boy that they both knew very well. Oh. This was a surprising development. A faint smile began to tug at the masked Jonin's lips. Where is this coming from? Sakura smiled and reached into her kunai pouch to pull out a familiar orange book. Despite being released earlier that year, it appeared to be weathered, signaling frequent use. Naruto isn't the only one who is going to get stronger. When he comes back, I'll make sure he knows that. He isn't in this alone. Kakashi smiled fully beneath his mask. He instinctively felt his own kunai pouch. A copy of Naruto's book was tucked away with him for similar reasons to Sakura. Normally a laid-back guy, reading that novel inspired him at times where he lacked motivation. Or even, when he lacked the will to continue moving forward. Though, there was only one question he had. Isn't that why you're training with Lady Tsunade? Sakura frowned. If you don't want to train me, you can just say so. Her voice was full of dejection. She shouldn't be surprised, when they were Team 7, Naruto, but mostly Sasuke, got most of Kakashi's attention. Sakura always seemed to be the odd girl out. However, Kakashi was quick to clarify. No. That isn't what I was trying to get at. It's just, with one of the Sannin training you, I didn't think you would want to train with me. It was hard to tell, but there was actually a bit of sadness in the masked shinobi's voice. Sakura, no longer seeming sad, gave the man a confused look. Of course I would. I know you can teach me things that even Lady Tsunade can't. Then why did you wait so long to ask me? If he was being honest, he had been waiting for the kunoichi to ask him to train. Though, with one of the Sannin training her, he felt a little inferior in comparison. Well, at first, I asked Lady Tsunade to ramp up our training. Pretty much any time she was free from her Hokage duties, it was to instruct me. It helped a lot. Now that I've gotten it down, I wanted your help with something. What are you talking about? Sakura smirked, and in response, she began to gather chakra into her fist. Then, suddenly, she slammed her fist into the ground. Crack. The ground cracked and splintered from the overwhelming force, then exploded in a display of rock shards, dust, and dirt. Kakashi's visible eye went wide, as he watched a tiny, little girl punch a crater into the ground. All the masked Jonin could think of was one person. Lady Tsunade, what have you done? So, what do you think? She asked smugly. The look on the silver-haired Jonin's face was worth it. I think I'm going to have to tell the Hokage so she can get this fixed. Kakashi, doing his best to rein in his composure, replied as casually as he could muster. After all, people are going to be upset that the area around the memorial is, well, you know. Suddenly realizing where they had been, Sakura's face turned a bright shade of pink. Oh no. I'm really sorry, Kakashi-sensei. I wasn't thinking. The masked teacher just waved it off. It isn't a big deal. Any half-decent Earth user can have this fixed in no time. Sakura calmed down, realizing that her sensei was right. She thought for a moment. Wait, sensei. You're an Earth-style user, can't you just fix it right now? Kakashi clapped his hands together, visible eye curved up which signaled the Jonin smiling beneath his mask. I don't have time for that, we're going to go start our training right now. For the first time in a long while, he was in good spirits. I think you're just lazy. Despite Sakura's words, she was grinning widely at the prospect of getting one-on-one training with her mentor. Kakashi, ignoring those very true words, simply began walking towards one of the other training grounds. They'd caused enough damage here after all. Though, from that display of incredible strength, Sharingan Kakashi had a good idea on what to first teach Tsunade's apprentice. So, tell me, Sakura. He began, Sakura following at his side. Do you know what your elemental affinity is? Ino Yamanaka was twirling her hair mindlessly while waiting for another customer to walk through the door. Team 10 had no mission scheduled for that day, so that meant the afternoon consisted of working at the Yamanaka flower shop while her parents were busy doing other things. It was a slow day, to the point Ino wished more people would start to come in. Being busy was better than being bored from having nothing to do, at least, to her it was. Ding! Finally. She looked over at the entrance, assuming that it was some desperate guy getting a last-minute anniversary gift for his girlfriend. But, instead, it was one of her former classmates, and current friends, Hinata. As far as the blonde knew, Hinata didn't come into the shop very often, even when Naruto was still in the village. One could only wonder what the Hyuga heiress wanted. Hi, Ino. The shy girl greeted, stuttering slightly from embarrassment. From Ino's perspective, there was nothing to be shy about. She had just walked in the door for crying out loud. What was embarrassing about that? What can I do for you, Hinata? Usually her brash and outspoken self around friends, her parents had conditioned her to always be polite as possible when behind the register. Politeness keeps the customers coming back. Though, when she a little younger that rule was usually broken whenever Sakura came through the door. Forehead girl was the exception. Well. I was thinking that you could help me. Sure. Ino confirmed, mistaking Hinata as a customer. Who are you buying the flowers for? Naruto isn't here, so it can't be him. Ino was a gossiper first, and an employee second. If something juicy was going on, it was a top priority that she was the first to know about it. Hinata questioned. Does that mean you're finally over Naruto? Ino couldn't believe it, she was sure she'd never see the day that happened. Is it Kiba? That was only one other person that made any sense. Shino was too creepy with all of his bugs for Hinata to be interested in him. Hinata was starting to get dizzy. Her cheeks turned a flush shade of pink. The heiress has done her best to try and rehearse what she was going to say to the future clan head, but it still came out wrong. And no. You have it all wrong. She exclaimed. I'm not here to buy flowers for anyone. Oh. Ino frowned slightly. She had been in the need for some good gossip to make the day more exciting. Well, what did you want? Hinata began to twiddle her fingers together. Well. I was wondering, if you could. The words were right there at the tip of her tongue, it was saying them that was the problem. Spit it out, Hinata. Ino said in her straightforward, but not rude, way. It's just us here, no need to be shy. That's what I want you to help me with. Ino blinked. What do you mean? I want you to help me be more like you. Ino's lack of tact was actually helping the lavender-haired girl get more comfortable with the conversation. More like me? She asked. You're fine the way you are, Hinata. You don't need to be like me. Hinata shook her head. That's not what I meant. How could she explain it to her? I just want to be able to talk. Ino attempted to finish the sentence. Watching the timid Hyuga girl struggle to get out her words helped Ino realize what was being asked of her. Did you want me to help you with your confidence? Hinata's eyes lit up and she began to vigorously nod her head. This was exactly why she needed Ino. The Yamanaka girl was her only friend who could possibly help her with this problem. If Hinata had even half of the blonde's confidence, Naruto wouldn't have been so alone growing up. Ino smiled. Well, why didn't you just say so? She thought about what she said for a moment. Oh, right. I know why. Chuckling at her realization. Can you please help? Hinata was desperate. Every day, Naruto's return grew closer. Sure, there was still a year and a half left, but in the 6 months it's been since Hinata had decided to change, not much progress had been made. She tried asking kurenai, reading books, and even meditating to ease her nerves. Nothing really helped. Ino was her only remaining chance. Sure. Ino exclaimed happily. Not only will she be the center of attention, but she can also help out a friend at the same time. It was perfect. Really? While Hinata hadn't expected her blonde friend to say no, hearing the confirmation still made her feel overjoyed. Yeah. Ino answered with a nod. The Yamanaka quickly looked over at the clock. It was 3 in the afternoon. We can start today after I close the shop. Can you meet me back here at say, 5? I don't think my parents will mind if I close up a little early today. Hinata nodded meekly, not expecting their sessions to start so soon. She hadn't mentally prepared herself for that. Great. I'll see you then. Thank you so much. Hinata politely bowed and left, Ino waving happily as her friend left the store. Ino smirked. The day might have been boring so far, but things were about to get very interesting. Sage and student stepped off the boat, and onto a hard, wooden dock. Neither ninja wearing their headbands to help avoid being recognized. They took in deep breaths, the air was thick and dense with mist. The mist was so heavy, that it was very difficult to see past a few dozen feet, the light from the sun hanging overhead did little to penetrate through. It reminded the blonde of his team's battles with Zabuza and Haku. A soft smile appeared on his face. They were missed, even though they started out as enemies. Interestingly enough, the normally vibrantly dressed genin was wearing something a little different. Very similar to Kakashi, he was clad in standard Leaf Village infantry attire of dark blue pants and a dark blue long-sleeve shirt, minus the green flak jacket. There was even a mask that could be pulled up to cover his face at a moment's notice to hide his trademark whiskers. Jiraiya had emphasized that if they were operating stealthily, Bright Orange would get them both caught. Thank you so much for your help. Jiraiya said as he tossed a bag of coins at the commercial fisherman. The man caught the bag and gave a swift nod. No one can know I was here, got it? Of course. The sage said as he watched their driver get back into his vessel. Let's go. Naruto implored. As far as he was concerned, they were here to do one thing, nothing else mattered. The boat ride had been torturous for the young genin. After being told that one of the culprits behind what happened to his friends was identified, he didn't know what to truly think. Was anger the correct emotion to feel? He was angry, but was it at the Akatsuki, or this man? After thinking it over during the trip, it was clear that they were both worthy of his rage. Though, he did not currently possess enough power to exact revenge on the S-class criminal organization. That would have to wait. Then, there came another dilemma swirling in the boy's mind. Was revenge truly the right answer? His best friend, Sasuke, had lost himself to that overwhelming feeling of anger and hatred. How could he, the person that was trying to save the Uchiha from the desire for revenge, follow the same path? Wouldn't that be the definition of hypocrisy? Yet, it was more complicated than that. The blonde just had no idea what he would do with all of this rage and despair he was feeling. It was eating away at him a little more every day. I think I finally understand you a little, Sasuke. Thoughts bitter from the realization that at their destructive battle at the final valley, he truly did not understand what the lone Uchiha was going through. Maybe if he had, the result would have been different. There was no way to tell. When I see this guy, I'll decide what I'm going to do. Jiraiya glanced over at his student. I was thinking we should gather a little information before we do anything rash. The infiltration expert tried to reason with the young boy. What is there that we need to know? Besides, the things I want to know. I'm going to have him tell me himself. I get that you're angry, Naruto, but we have to think this through. The Sannin wasn't used to seeing his godson like this. Whether or not it was warranted was irrelevant, it just wasn't like him. Their eyes clashed, and Jiraiya was surprised by the fierceness of those blue orbs. I've been thinking this through for months. Since that day, though, when I pictured it in my head, it was with those Akatsuki bastards. The sage felt uneasy, like a pit was forming in the bottom of his stomach. Can we just go over everything we know so far? Naruto didn't reply, signaling he obliged with his master's request. After searching for months, my informant was able to locate the collection office that the one named Kakuzu went to. After interrogating the man who operated it, we were able to find the guy who placed the bounty on your friend Tsunade. Jiraiya paused, recalling what he had read on the scroll the messenger toad delivered. Though, the man who actually put the hit out was a proxy. It looks like the real guy went to great lengths to hide his identity. He must be important. Naruto spat. Of course, people with power always want to keep those without it from prospering. He had seen enough of that in Wave. You're exactly right. My spy politely convinced this proxy to tell us about his boss. Loyalty and a big paycheck go out the window when a person's life is on the line. And the guy's name appears to be Jaku Mansuda, a high-ranking government official here in the Land of Water. I don't get it. Naruto said. Why would someone like that care about Tsunade and the Land of Waves? I don't know if it's relevant, but from what I remember, Gato Company operated out of the Land of Water. Jiraiya stated. What? I thought it was out of the Land of Waves. Naruto questioned. His teacher shook his head in disagreement, long white hair flowing wildly behind him. Waves was one of Gato's many ventures. The actual company did most of its business out of the Land of Water. Gato Company did a lot of illegal drugs and weapons smuggling mostly, by sea. It would make sense to do business in the nation that holds the world's largest port system. The Land of Water, being an island, relies heavily on importation and exportation, making expansive ports and docks a necessity. Naruto nodded, understanding the logic behind the man's words. I don't know if it is relevant, but I'll make sure he tells me everything we need to know. The toad sage eyed his godson cautiously. The way the boy was talking, Jiraiya wondered if this was a good idea. Sure, the kid needs help moving past this, but was this the way to do it? Jiraiya saw what revenge did to the blonde's former teammate, maybe exposing him to this was a bad idea. Kid, I was thinking that I should be the one to go in and do the talking. You can come along with me, but this is my specialty, after all. No, this would not do. It had to be him, he was the one that lost everything. Sensei, please. Let me go in alone. I can do this. His voice wasn't angry like the middle-aged man was expecting. It was sad, pleading. This decision was agonizing. What was the right choice? Looking into the boy's eyes, he no longer saw anger and hatred. Had he imagined that? All Jiraiya saw was a lost child who wanted answers. Maybe, then, letting the boy go in alone was the correct choice. Are you sure you're feeling up to this? The Sannin asked slowly. You don't have to do this alone, you know. They locked eyes and the genin made it clear that he wanted this more than anything. In his mind, this was all his fault. The raid on Wave, the deaths of his friends, none of it would have happened if he hadn't to visit them. If anyone was going to make this right, it was going to be him. Jiraiya let out a sigh. Great Lord Elder, I hope this is the right way. Okay. I'll let you go in. As the words came out, he almost wished he could take them back. Naruto let out a deep breath he didn't even realize was being held in. Thank goodness. Just know this, kid. I'll have clones right outside the windows, and on top of the building itself. And I won't be far behind, either. If things go sour, we leave immediately. Got it? Yes, sir. Naruto agreed enthusiastically. Now it was Jiraiya's turn to exhale, again. Had he made the right choice? The spacious room appeared to be some kind of library. There were countless hardcover books being held up by expensive-looking mahogany shelves built into the walls. There were no windows, which was the perfect excuse he could give the guards so they wouldn't interrupt his personal time. Jaku Matsuda smiled as he sat in a very luxurious chair with a book in hand. This was a rare occurrence, he was a very busy man. After all, someone with the power he had usually had a full schedule. Sure, he wasn't a feudal lord or the Mizukage, but that wasn't the end-all be-all in this world. Matsuda governed the land of water's richest and most influential port town. Located on the western side of the nation, most of the goods that came from the land of fire and land of wind ended up there. And just recently, things have been starting to get even better. The bounty he thought was never going to get cashed in was a smashing success. Though, having to deal with that scary man in the black and red robes was not something he would want to do again. Yet, sometimes you have to do undesirable things when working with the criminal underworld. After Gato and dozens of hired thugs were driven back by the villagers, and by an alleged team of strong ninja, it seemed no one had been willing to take the bounty. Jaku had thought about raising the price, but it would have had to come out of his own pocket. The land of water higher-ups kept a tight watch over the town's budget, and if a large sum of money suddenly went missing, they would have been all over him. Now that the pesky bridge builder was taken care of, hiring mercenaries to blow up that bridge would be no problem. Due to the wealth the small nation had gained in such a short amount of time, blowing up the bridge would yield little result as long as the master bridge builder was alive. They had the money to simply build a new one, along with the expertise of the master contractor. Though, the cost of that demolition job would have to come out of his own pocket, which would likely come at a much higher price than a bounty for an old man. Through taking bribes and other illegal activities for these 6 long months, he almost had enough. Then, things could go back to the way they were. Creak. That was odd. That sounded like it was coming from above his head. Looking up, and before Jaku knew what was happening, he was violently thrown to the ground. Oof. He grunted out as his head forcibly bounced off of the spotless hardwood flooring. Before the government leader could fully recover, a knee was shoved into his gut with so much force he almost passed out from the shock. He sucked in air at a furious pace, face going red from the strain. Don't make too much noise. The person now leaning over him warned in a low whisper. If any of your guards come in here, all they are going to find is a body. The politician's blood ran cold at the chilling declaration. Regaining his breath, and sight now fully returning to the downed man, Jaku laid eyes on the mysterious assailant. Striking blue eyes, unusual blonde spiky hair, and a body the size of a child. Shoo! The intruder held a finger up to his masked lips. All Matsuda could do was nod his head in understanding. Quiet, he would be. This person was a child, but that knee strike told him a very important fact that appearances never could. This child was a shinobi. Why, you can take anything you want. The man whispered shaky words. Please don't hurt me. The masked shinobi didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his leg pouch and swiftly pulled out a sharp kunai, swirling in his hand for good measure. Before speaking, the blonde brought the blade to his hostage's neck. Why did you do it? Naruto asked. Jaku looked at his attacker, confused by the vagueness of the question. Though with a sharp blade pressed firmly against his neck, he was terrified of saying the incorrect thing. The man had done a lot of questionable things in his career, there was no telling what this assassin was talking about. Do what? He asked for clarification. Tsunade. You had him killed. He spat as the kunai was pressed even harder against the skin, drawing a slight amount of blood. Though the volume of his words wasn't loud, the leaf shinobi said it with deathly venom. The downed man's eyes widened. How did this child know about that? He was very careful to make sure it never got back to him. The official's mind was racing at the possibilities. Tell me why you did it. And a little bit of advice before you speak, don't lie. Those words, they promised pain if they were ignored. Jaku took in a deep breath to slow down his heart rate. Maybe if he told this boy everything, he would be allowed to live. That was the only way he saw himself getting out of this situation alive. The bridge builder? The which the blonde nodded stiffly. It was to correct Gato's mistake. What do you mean? What does Gato have to do with any of this? He's dead. Gato and we had an agreement. I allowed him to operate through my ports, but at a cost. A little kickback my way, if you will. That's when the desperate politician got an idea. Hey. I am extremely wealthy. If you let me go, I'll give you so much money you can retire from being a ninja today. I promise. The money that was supposed to be for the bridge demolition, he would gladly give it up in exchange for his life being spared. Naruto was disgusted by this rat that was trying to scurry its way out of trouble. Taking a deep breath, the youth calmed himself. There was more information they needed. Right now, he was more valuable alive than dead. If you and Gato were so rich working together, why did you target the land of waves? It was a poor nation, I'm sure you didn't make much money off of exploiting its people. The genin could easily just end this man's life. But something was eating away at him. Why? Why were people like this? What kind of twisted justification could a person have that would make them commit such horrible atrocities? Naruto had to know. Seeing that the bribe had no effect, the greedy politician kept answering the questions. That bridge. I feared that once that bridge was built, it would affect my trading ports. The land of waves was poor, yes, but once that bridge was constructed, trade began to prosper there. Merchants that would normally trade directly with us at the ports in the land of fire, traded with Wave first. Instead, Wave would purchase all of their goods, and then sell them to us at our ports for a marked-up price. It was true, due to the geographical position of the land of waves, it being directly between the land of fire and the land of water. It was in the perfect position to be the middleman for the two countries. However, due to the Leaf Village's heroics in Wave, the two nations became allies, along with the land of wind by way of their allegiance with the land of fire. This offer did not extend to the land of water, meaning that this new way of trading benefited everyone except them. Jaku saw this as a form of illegal collusion between sovereign nations, and decided to use force to break it up. Naruto was seething with anger. He did his best to give this monster the benefit of the doubt, hoping that it was just some giant misunderstanding somehow. But no, it was what he thought. This was over something as superficial as money. The politician saw the look in the assassin's eyes, and quickly tried to defend himself. Why you have to understand? I was thinking about the people of my land. These people love and depend on the goods that come from the land of fire and wind. Our nation, it's bound by water. Our resources are finite, we rely on trade with the other nations. What Wave was doing was unethical, and it raised the prices of imported goods for my nation's people. This weasel was pushing the blonde boy to his limit. You're going to play the victim card? You bled that poor nation dry, and then killed innocent people because it was hurting your bottom line. You act like it was for your nation, but that isn't the whole truth. You're a greedy little rat. You teamed up with Gato to line your own pockets, and once the land of waves started growing, you felt threatened. Yes, that is true, but it helped out me and my nation's people. Please, I beg you. Let me live. I only wanted to serve my country. The politician was now sobbing hysterically. Usually, he could talk his way out of any situation with his charm and charisma. But this situation was different, he could really die here. I don't want to die. Naruto was surprised how genuine he sounded. Were his people so important that he would so easily damn the lives of others? Your people wouldn't have starved. Instead of sharing the wealth so everyone can live happily, you tried to hog it all for yourselves. The boy spat. Initially, he had come here to exact sweet revenge for Tsunade, Inari, Tsunami, and everyone in Wave. They deserved it. However, Sasuke and his yearning for revenge crossed his mind once again. Witnessing Sasuke abandon the village for a wanted criminal to gain enough power to exact revenge on his brother, it put this whole situation in a different perspective. Could he corrupt himself in the name of anger? Should he give in to the rage and bloodlust he was feeling? Would that truly solve his problems? No. After meeting Matsuda, the boy had made up his mind. Naruto refused to kill this man out of anger and revenge. Yet, watching this sniveling little weasel cry over his own pathetic life and his nation's people made something in Naruto snap. It was nearly impossible to explain, but it was almost as if another Naruto took control of his body and he was watching himself from inside his own mind. Then, all of a sudden, he was back in control. Despite that, something felt off, different. Strange. Everything was clear. His mind no longer had a thick fog hanging over it, something that he had been feeling for quite a long time now. It was like he could finally see. Talking to this corrupt monster led the genin down a different path than he was expecting. Jaku talked about the national interests of his country and citizens. Yet, those interests caused innocent people to die. Why? Why must a nation only act in the best interests of its people, and forsake those who aren't? Every person should matter the same, regardless of national ties. And those who would willingly corrupt the entire world and kill innocents for the sake of themselves and their own nation must die. Before Jakumatsuda was ever aware of what was going on, his throat was viciously slashed by the sharp blade of Naruto's kunai. Thick, red blood began spewing in every direction. Instinctively, he brought his hands up to attempt to stop the bleeding, but it was futile. The wound was far too severe, red liquid was flowing freely between the gaps of his fingers. The politician attempted to let out a horrendous scream to alert his guards, or anyone to save him from this fate, but before he could the blonde placed one of his hands tightly over the mouth of the victim. Shu, holding a now bloody finger to his masked lips. Eyes widened in utter horror, body erratically kicking in every direction, terrified that his death was drawing near, yet the only sound he could muster was a gargling, muffled cry for help. It was torturous to be completely at the mercy of another human being. There was nothing he could do. Yet, the irony was that was how Jaku and Gato made the land of waves feel every day for years. Naruto smiled eerily behind his dark blue mask. Your death will help purge the world, at least a little. A moment after the slash was made, Jakumatsuda stopped moving. Eyes now rolled back into his head, body completely limp. It was clear, he was dead. Naruto stared down at his first kill as a ninja with dead, emotionless eyes. There were stories that a shinobi's first kill was the most difficult. That when someone so young takes another's life, they can suffer from terrible nightmares for weeks, or months. Ninja may try their best to lose their humanity, but as Zabuza said it best, they always fail. Yet, Naruto felt nothing staring at the man he deemed a parasite to the world. He searched his heart and came up empty-handed. Did that make him a bad person? He didn't know. That determination doesn't really mean anything. It was what was best for the world, and that was all that mattered. Standing up, the boy dropped the kunai with a loud clang. Sure enough, seconds later there was a set of footsteps running in the direction of the library. Swiftly, he got behind where the door would be opening. Just a moment later, the large oak door busted open to reveal one of the guards that were stationed down the hall. Naruto had passed him on the way in, he recognized the man. The sentinel gasped audibly as he laid eyes on the lifeless body of the governor. How did this happen? The guard shouted as he dropped down to one knee in the middle of the room to check his boss pulse. From the look of it, this guy wasn't a ninja. Perfect. Naruto thought to himself as he silently moved out from behind the door and, unbeknownst to the guard, slipped into the hallway that he came in through. Just as he turned the corner at the end of the hall, the sentry burst from the room. We have a security breach. Lord Matsuda has been murdered. Lockdown, no one leaves. Naruto shook his head. Coming this far, there was no way they were going to catch him. With one leap, he crashed through a nearby third-story window leading outside. Landing on a tall tree, he jumped onto a nearby roof and sped away. Gone before any guards had any clue what had happened. Chapter 15, Change. After getting what he deemed a sufficient distance between himself and the crime scene, Naruto landed on the rooftop of houses that resided close to the western coast of the Land of Water. Jaku's mansion had been deeper into the rather large town that he had been ruling over. Pulling down the mask around his mouth to breathe more freely, the whiskered boy tried to reflect on everything that had just transpired. That was if he had time to do so. Naruto. Said boy turned towards the voice, watching as Jiraiya landed on the same rooftop. The sage did not look happy. A vein was bulging out the side of his forehead. Are you going to tell me what the hell that was? We had agreed that you were supposed to interrogate the suspect, and then if he had incriminated himself, we would then take him into custody. Does any of that ring a bell? Naruto frowned, not understanding why the Sannin was upset. He was guilty, why was there any need to take him in? Jiraiya looked as if he had been struck. That man could have had valuable intelligence relating to the Akatsuki for all we know. Yet, now we will have no idea because you killed him. The decision to let the genin who held a grudge go in by himself continued the string of what Jiraiya concluded were terrible judgments on his part. The boy had just murdered a government official in cold blood for heaven's sake. The sage didn't even think he could tell Tsunade about any of this. If anyone found out, the political ramifications would be massive. Hell, they already were. Naruto, unperturbed by his mentor's anger, simply shook his head. I don't think that guy had any ties to the Akatsuki. As you said, he used a proxy to put out a bounty, which only happened to be taken up by one of the group's members. He worked with Gato and resented the Land of Waves because their newfound success was hurting the economy of this town. Interestingly enough, the venom that had been present in his voice earlier was gone. The boy's tone was monotonous. Jiraiya rubbed his temples in frustration. He wanted to reprimand and punish the Jinchuriki for his actions, but that would be pointless. If anything, this was his fault, not the boy's. Not like there's anything new there. The Toad Sage thought to himself sadly. Though, there was one thing he wanted to make sure the boy understood. Even if that is the case, Naruto, we can't just kill people like that. Why? Naruto asked incredulously. Ninja kill people for much less on missions every day. What makes this any different? We weren't here on an official mission. Crimes like that, people should be tried by the law and then punished. If we had taken him back to the Leaf, his crimes would have been acknowledged and his assets would have been seized and used to help give the Land of Waves some form of restitution to help with the damage they have received. Now that he's dead, that can't happen. Naruto loved his godfather more than almost anything, but he just couldn't agree with his stance on this. A high-ranking official from the Land of Water being tried in a different nation. Do you think that they would just be okay with that? The second word got out that he was in our custody, they would have requested him back so he could be tried by them. Jaku would have gotten off free and Wave would have still gotten nothing. At least this way, the world is better off for everyone with him gone. Naruto was thinking about what Neji had said to him during their fight. How the Land of Lightning had sent an important ninja into the Leaf to steal Hinata. Yet, when killed for his illegal actions that went against the newly formed peace agreements, the Raikage still demanded that Hinata's father be killed in retribution. As far as the blonde was concerned, something very similar would have been likely to happen to keep war from breaking out. If no one knew who killed him, then there was nothing to worry about, right? That isn't your decision to make. Jiraiya contested, hoping his godson would see it from his side. If everyone just went around deciding who should live and die, and then acting on it, there would be no order to the world. It would be complete chaos. Naruto's head was beginning to hurt. The world already feels that way. Terrible people get away with things every day. It just isn't fair. I know. Jiraiya agreed knowingly. But, when you're Hokage, these are the kinds of situations you'll be forced to deal with regularly. You can't let your emotions guide you. No. Naruto said, slightly surprising his teacher. I didn't do this for revenge, I did it because it was the right thing to do. They stared at one another for what seemed like a long time. Two individuals, seemingly with two clashing mindsets of how the world should work. On one hand, the experienced, yet optimistic, man who believes in the goodness of people. Jiraiya believes that order, understanding, and compassion are the ways that human beings can avoid unnecessary conflict and live in harmony. On the other, the much less experienced boy who has seen far too many horrors in his short life is beginning to believe that there will always terrible people no matter what you do and that the only way to deal with them is to get rid of them yourself. A Hokage doesn't always do what they think is right. They sometimes must do what they have to. I'm starting to wonder about that, sensei. Naruto said vaguely, his dull gaze was far off into the misty horizon. What do you mean? The Hokage. When talking about the fire shadow, the genin always had a sparkle in his eyes and a smile on his face. Not this time. The tone Naruto used was one that had a touch of disdain. Does a Kage get things done? I know you were offered Hokage, why did you turn it down? The boy asked with genuine interest. Jiraiya, surprised by the question, answered honestly. I turned it down because I don't think I deserve to be the Hokage. I have made far too many mistakes, and continue to make more every day. The village needed someone better than me. Someone who could lead it like Sarutobi-sensei did. But, your spy network. All the S-rank missions that you've carried out for the village. Naruto remembered how many missions the sage had said he completed in passing conversation. You've been able to do a lot more for the village's well-being than someone who sits behind a desk all day and fills out paperwork. It was a very simplistic way of describing the Hokage's duties, but it wasn't entirely inaccurate. What are you trying to say? The Sannin was watching the boy change before his very eyes, and he wasn't sure if it was for the better, or not. I'm saying, I would rather be like you than the Hokage. I can't make an active difference in the world if I was forced to be at a desk all day. In Naruto's eyes, if it were up to the Hokage in the political landscape of the world, Jaku would still be alive, and most likely never see the inside of a jail cell. But you've wanted to be Hokage since before I met you. Why give it up? Naruto looked at him sincerely. I don't think I realized what the world was truly like, I guess. Even after all this, for the first time, I feel like I'm not lost anymore. Actions are what matters, not titles, and I don't think I could truly act as the Hokage. Not only that, but a Hokage is supposed to always act in the best interest of its people. Could he do that? Would that not be similar to how Jaku operated in the land of water? What about innocent people around the world that die every day? Surely, that kind of allegiance would hinder the blonde from helping those outside his own village. He'd keep these thoughts to himself, for now, though. He had much more thinking to do. You're still a genin, kid. Jiraiya chided. What you did here today, genin don't get to make choices like that. And if they did without consulting with their captain, there is a good chance they would be decommissioned from the ninja ranks. Naruto thought that statement over with a hand loosely on his hip, and the other resting underneath his chin. The sage finally had made his first good point in this conversation. The genin had heard something similar when told he wouldn't be granted the rank of the Chunin after the Chunin exams, despite his valiant efforts during the assault on the Leaf Village. Despite going toe-to-toe with a tailed beast, he couldn't be trusted to lead a squad due to lacking leadership qualities and critical judgment. Okay. Naruto acknowledged. If that's what it takes, I'll move up the ranks and become someone the village can depend on to make the tough decisions out in the field. I'll do it without being the Hokage. Oh. How are you going to do that? Jiraiya asked with his hands now on his hips. Plan on going back to take part in the Chunin exams in a few months? No. Naruto said simply with a swift shake of the head. That's a waste of the time we have. When we get back to the Leaf, I'll let my work on missions speak for itself. They'll have to promote me. Humph, that's what I thought you'd say. Jiraiya nodded his head at the boy. Now that their intense conversation was over, it was high time the sage addressed the elephant in the room. Even if the kid had just done something awful, that doesn't mean he didn't care for the boy. Of course, he did. Still, Jiraiya sighed, he wasn't very good at this part. Naruto? Yeah. How are you feeling after all of this? Are you okay? There was no better way to phrase the question in the Guardian's eyes. If he had been too vague, then Naruto may have just tiptoed around the inquiry if he didn't want to answer it. No, it had to be direct, even if the blonde wanted to ignore it. Naruto blinked, almost forgetting why they were even on a random roof in the land of water, to begin with. Almost as if Jaku's death had such little importance to him now. In the genin's mind he was able to rationalize the politician's death in such a way that he didn't even feel like he killed anyone. Sure, he took a life, but it was the life of one of the most vile humans he had ever had the displeasure of meeting. That justified his actions, in his opinion. He stood there for a minute, taking in his surroundings and looking deep within himself for an answer to the question the sage posed. It was an answer he had been looking for when he had still been alone on that rooftop prior to Jiraiya's arrival. While he would always be sad about the untimely deaths of his good friends, the inward struggle that was tearing the boy apart was gone, for the most part. It felt like he was truly seeing for the first time in his life. I feel good, really. The blonde finally answered with sincerity. I think I'll be okay now. Are you sure? Instead of answering with words, Naruto held out his open palm. In it, swirled the powerful Rasengan. Not just any Rasengan, Jiraiya noted, but a perfect one-handed one. Looking up at Naruto's face, he didn't appear to be strained in any way. A far cry from how he looked a couple days ago when performing the technique. In actuality, the boy had probably had the skill to use the complete Rasengan for months now. Only, because of his state of mind post-wave, his focus, lack of sleep, and brewing emotions throwing off his equilibrium, making it impossible to perform a jutsu that took such diligent focus. Jiraiya was still upset about what the kid did, but it appeared to have a positive effect on the boy, nonetheless. That was the goal, after all, right? Don't think for 1 second that you're out of trouble, kid. Naruto, dispelling the technique, bowed respectfully, signaling he'll take any punishment that is placed upon him. Though, that doesn't mean the boy believes what he did was wrong. No, it was the right thing to do. Naruto was sure of it. Yes, sensei. No training today, only cleaning. The sage had instructed. Naruto laid down in his bedroll, his exhausted muscles thanking him profusely for the kind gesture. After the boys' actions in the land of water yesterday, when they had returned to Mount Myaboku, Jiraiya had demanded that he clean the entire house as part of his punishment. Having only a small apartment to clean back in the leaf, and not even doing a good job at maintaining that living space, cleaning an entire house to the high standards of the toads and his teacher was a tall task. Though, considering how mad the sage was, it could have been a lot worse. The Sannin made it clear that everything that happened was to stay between them, and his true punishment was to be determined at a later date. This was acceptable to the blonde, even if Naruto truly believed he had done nothing wrong. The genin had the utmost respect for his teacher and would welcome any discipline that came his way. Though, at least now it was time to get some rest. From all the commotion in the land of water to getting settled back in Toadland, both he and his teacher hadn't slept at all the previous night. Surprisingly, Jiraiya was not in bed yet even though he had to be just as tired as the blonde. Though, it seemed Ma and Pa were not having the same issue, as they were loudly snoring away. Chuckling, Naruto, too, closed his eyes, hoping today would finally be the day that sleep would welcome him back with soft, open arms. Drip. Naruto's eyes snapped open the moment something didn't feel right. No longer in the room he and Jiraiya shared with the toads, the boy was laying down in a pool of lukewarm water. At first, the Jinchuriki was confused, though that quickly dissipated when he saw the familiar metal piping that aligned the ceiling. What am I doing here? He wondered to himself with a throaty groan of annoyance. I just wanted to go to sleep. It looked the same, like a depressing sewer that had long since been forgotten. Standing up, the jailer walked down the dark corridor into a large, but familiar, room, water splashing lightly at his feet with each step he took. Looking up, the warden saw the giant cage that held his lifelong friend, the nine-tailed fox. The enormous beast towered over its small host. The malice was so intense that a normal human wouldn't be able to be in the same room as these two. Yet, Naruto was no normal human. You know, I wanted to talk to you for a while, I just didn't think you'd call me in here yourself. Naruto began, wary, but interested, in the fox's intentions. The fox just growled as its several tails lashed behind it threateningly, breath so hot that steam leaked out of the sides of his mouth. Naruto. He snarled with venom. What? The blonde's eyes were firm, stance wider than normal to signify he wouldn't be backing down. The fox would not intimidate him today. The beast paused briefly, seemingly thinking something over in its mind. Where did the real you go? It finally said. Its facial features conveyed something, though the blonde was not astute with picking up on body language, which went double when the body language was coming off a massive fox demon instead of a person. There was a hint of confusion mixed in with the regular anger that the fox normally had. Surprisingly, it seemed like a genuine question, further confusing the boy. What do you mean, the real me? I'm right here, fox. The Jinchuriki answered to the best of his ability, not really understanding the question. Unbeknownst to the blonde child, he had two halves that made him up. One half, the outward half as the beast liked to call it, was the half that Naruto showed everyone. Happy, confident, strong, caring, optimistic, and trusting. Growing up, these were the traits that Naruto thought a Hokage needed to possess. So, through the intense desire of wanting to become the shadow of the land of fire, he adopted them unto himself. That isn't to say these personality traits are a facade the boy puts on to trick those around him. Outward Naruto truly believes that he is like that. Someone who can be Hokage. Then, there was inward Naruto, the half that the fox preferred. Inward Naruto, or the part of himself he liked to hide from others, was scared, pessimistic, paranoid, weak, self-conscious, angry, bitter, and best of all, vengeful. This Naruto was created by the people of the Leaf Village. They broke him down mentally and emotionally by hating him, or even ignoring his existence, making him a shell of a child. All of the hatred they threw his way materialized into something that hated them back just as much. That was the half that the fox would give his chakra to. The Nine-Tails stared at his host for what seemed like minutes, examining the child from head to toe with a critical eye. Though they hadn't met many times prior, the fox had a good idea about what his host's outward persona was like. The child standing before him was not the same one he had first met. There was something different. Yet, his better half was gone, too. What was going on? Suddenly, it clicked. Interesting. The chakra beast thought to itself. Did the two halves merge? Yes, that was the only explanation. Two halves, once isolated from each other, now whole. Seemingly done with this short interaction, the beast laid back down, eyes now closed, head resting on its paw. The demon almost looked like a regular fox. After several moments of trying to sleep, the fox felt something was off. Opening its eyes back up, the Ninetales was slightly surprised to see the boy still standing in the very same spot he had left him, eyeing its prisoner intensely. "We're done here. Get out," the monster warned. "I said that I wanted to talk to you, so let's talk." Naruto picked back up the conversation the large creature had tried to end. "You seem to have gotten what you called me in here for, now it's my turn." Naruto still didn't know what the fox meant by its question, but he doubted he would be able to extract that information from his tenant today. The Ninetales chuckled at the small child, though that was quickly replaced with a terrifying grin that showed off the demon's massive fangs. "You little worm, you think you can give me orders? I should kill you for that." As terrifying as that threat would normally be, Naruto didn't even flinch in response. "I've been reading a lot about seals these past few months. Did you know that?" Naruto continued, ignoring the threat. "One of the seals that I learned about were the ones people use to seal tailed beasts inside human hosts." Naruto grabbed his stomach instinctively at the mention of this. "Get to the point, boy," the angry fox demanded. "When I receive chakra from you, it's a two-way street." The host of the strongest tailed beast began. "If I want chakra from you, I can only get it if you willingly give it to me. I can't just rip it from you whenever I please." The boy thought of his battle with Neji, or when he first summoned Gamabunta. Both instances Naruto requested the necessary chakra which the fox handed over by its own admission. "On the flip side, you can't force chakra down my throat. If you want to give it to me, I have to accept it from you." The fox, though appearing very angry that his peace and quiet was being interrupted for an extended time, was listening intently. "Except, when I get emotional," the blonde acknowledged. "Like in my battle with Sasuke, it took a long time to remember, but I never asked for your chakra during that fight, nor did I willingly accept it. You were able to force it on me." The fox didn't like where this conversation was going. "What are you trying to say, boy?" "Perhaps the most important thing I learned, was that when a tailed beast continually pushes chakra through the cracks of the seal, over time, the seal will weaken. If you could force all of that chakra onto me, you would be doing it all the time, but you can't." Naruto smirked as he watched the fox's eyes widen slightly. Springing to its feet, the fox slammed his head against the cage violently. The shockwave rippled the water at their feet, making waves that flowed to every corner of the room. The Ninetales was livid. Nearly 14 years he had been trapped inside this pathetic human, and the plan he had been executing almost from the start had been found out. This was unacceptable. How would he be able to free himself and kill all of those evil humans now? "You little worm. Do you think that you can keep me locked in here forever? I'll get out eventually, don't you forget that." Slamming his head against the cage door once more in a futile attempt to rip the boy apart. The powerful embodiment of chakra was seething, so angry it was almost breathing fire. "That isn't what I'm trying to say." The boy was doing his best to calm his prisoner down. There was no negative emotions radiating off of the jailer, surprising the chakra beast. The fox said nothing, though the visible fangs meant that talking wasn't really on the demon's mind, which urged the genin to continue. "When I saw old man Tsunade dead, I was so angry. I wanted to get your power so badly so I could kill those Akatsuki bastards. Yet, despite my willingness, you never gave it to me that day." "Why? Humph." The fox chuckled deeply. "You think I pay attention to what happens in your worthless life? I couldn't care less about that." Naruto shook his head with a laugh, angering the beast. "You can't lie, we have a connection. I don't know how, but I could feel you watching that day. And yet, even though you could have weakened the seal a little more by giving me chakra in my moment of weakness, you didn't. I just want to know why." This child was starting to irritate the tailed beast. "I just told you, now leave." The fox hissed, not used to having a human stand up to him like this since. "Well, the one with those horrible eyes. I'm not done." Naruto continuing to defy the chakra monster. "Well, even if you won't tell me why, I want you to know that I'm going to need your help." The beast scoffed. "Me, help you? Ha, that's a good one, brat. Hey, it's in your best interest to help me. Those Akatsuki, they're more so after you than me. If anything, I'm keeping you safe. I just ask that you help me when I come to you. The Ninetales scoffed in disgust. I know humans. Humans only care about themselves. You're fighting to keep yourself alive, you don't care about me. Naruto stared down the fox with great intensity, vibrant blue orbs clashing with blood-red daggers. I want to keep everyone safe. Myself, you, my friends, innocent people. Everyone, and I need your help to do that. The massive creature eyed the warden suspiciously. You know what my plan has been, yet you still want my chakra. Why? I don't know what happened to you, why you're like this, or why you're locked inside me, but you at least seem better than the Akatsuki. They sat in silence for what seemed like a long time. Recently. Naruto finally breaking the silence. I learned that humans can be extremely cruel. Well, I already knew that, but this made me realize what that truly meant. They take innocent lives without a care in the world, as long as they get what they want for themselves and those important to them. Then, I look at you, a powerful creature that my nation uses as a military asset, all locked up in a cage unable to even stretch your legs and walk around. The boy demonstrated the freedom that he had, pacing back and forth on the other side of the locked door. I wouldn't be surprised if we are stuck together because of humanity's cruelty against you. That last sentence caused the fox's open eye to widen considerably. The Ninetales had apparently had enough. Suddenly, Naruto was forced out of his own mindscape and back in the bedroll he had been laying in. The feeling was jarring, almost like vertigo. Good thing I'm already laying down. The genin thought to himself wryly. Now that Naruto had regained his senses, his prisoner was back on his mind. It was hard to get a read on what the beast was thinking. It certainly wasn't much of a talker, unless the words were threats of violence and murder. Though, even those words seemed to be a bit forced. Compared to the Akatsuki's psychotic Haiden, the Ninetales' anger seemed different. While Haiden's eyes betrayed a monster who killed because he could and it was fun, the eyes of the fox were angry daggers aimed at the world. Aimed at a world that must have caused him a lot of pain, which is something Naruto understands. The blonde let out a tired yawn. Oh well. It was too late to be thinking about these things. They would assuredly keep him up the entire night. Closing his eyes, he prayed that unconsciousness would greet him with a warm, comforting embrace. One that has been foreign to him for a long time, now. Within 5 minutes, for the first time in over 6 months, Naruto Uzumaki fell asleep peacefully. And tonight, no horrible nightmares would disrupt his slumber. Again, and again, and again, and again. This time, it was Jiraiya who couldn't sleep, despite being completely exhausted, both physically and emotionally. If he was being honest with himself, this last year has been a disaster, and it all rests upon his shoulders. Sure, Naruto had gained a considerable amount of strength since they had left the village, though, pretty much all of the progress came in about 4 of those 12 months. It was like every decision the man made ended up blowing up in his face. First, there was the bet he made with his student. At the time, the sage thought his reasoning was good. Writing would help teach the boy a bit of discipline. If the kid failed it would be an excuse to keep him from going after Sasuke as per their agreement. And it gave the author a little bit of time to complete the book that was going to help fund his spy network. Sounds reasonable, right? Wrong. Now, looking back on it, he just sees himself neglecting his godson like he always has. Cold-heartedly giving the boy busywork so he can indulge himself in the 3 shinobi prohibitions. Yes, the ones Jiraiya himself told Naruto to avoid completely. I mean, for the first 12 years of the kid's life he was completely absent. Yet, Naruto never was as angry as Jiraiya thinks he should have been. The kid was probably just so starved for attention that in his eyes I could do no wrong. And the only reason he was starved for all that attention in the first place was because I left him in a village that resented him. He had always known that what he did was wrong, and the prospect of trying to explain himself to Kushina and Minato in the afterlife was terrifying. That was because he had no defense, he failed them. Sure, he had reached an all-time low at that point in his life. Orochimaru, his best friend, had defected from the village. Minato, his adopted son, had died during the Ninetales attack. However, a ninja's job is to endure, and the Toad Sage couldn't endure it so he could be in his godson's life at an early age. It ate away at him every day. Then, there was his brilliant idea of dropping his wanted student off at some town the Sannin had never been to while he went and investigated supposed Akatsuki activity nearby. Sure, it was Tsunade's orders, but that doesn't mean he should have said yes. His most important mission was ensuring Naruto's safety, and he failed that miserably when the Akatsuki nearly kidnapped his student. Yet, his good nature and loyalty to Tsunade, the village, and its allies made him put Minato's son's, his godchild's, life in grave danger. Falling right into a trap by the enemy, that isn't like me. Lastly, and probably most foolishly, was the incident in the land of water. Jiraiya never had children of his own, so when the blonde was going through pain, he didn't know what to do to help him. The shinobi code tells us that we have to kill our emotions, only then will we be the perfect tool to use. Though, the sage never believed in that crap. Humans, shinobi or not, were meant to feel emotions, especially pain. Shutting the door on our emotions is bad for the psyche and the heart. Instead, it is important to be aware of yourself and what you are feeling, only then can you become better. That's why Jiraiya wanted Naruto to face these feelings head-on, so he could get past them and grow as a person. That reasoning led him to make the huge mistake of letting his pupil meet the object of his rage face-to-face alone. At least, that was the excuse he told himself. And look how that turned out. Sure, he raised those kids from the Hidden Rain village, but by the time they had met, those kids had weathered the storms of war all on their own. They just wanted to survive, and that was something he could actually help them with. If they had been in emotional turmoil like Naruto, he probably would have messed that up, too. Though, now that he thought about it, he messed that up too, didn't he? After all, last time he heard, those three were dead. Jiraiya had said in a fit of anger that Naruto would get a more severe punishment for what he had done. Though, that anger was misplaced. After reflecting about everything that has transpired, the sage wasn't angry at his student. He was angry at himself, and he wouldn't punish the kid for something that wasn't his fault. Because everything that has happened has been his own fault, there was no debating that. So, how could he be mad at the boy for something like that? Now, because of his mistakes, Naruto was adopting ideologies that were concerning, to say the least. Sure, in theory, everything the boy said on that rooftop had some truth to it. Had the Land of Fire attempted to try Jaku as a criminal, he would have most likely been extradited back to the Hidden Mist village where he would have been given a proverbial slap on the wrist. So, yes, Naruto's actions made the world a better place, so to speak. But it was a decision made by a rash, young genin who has almost no knowledge of the geopolitical landscape of the 5 great nations. It is great that the boy wants what is best for the world, but if left unchecked bad consequences could follow in the far future. Had the Sannin actually done his job as the boy's godfather, none of this would have happened. Though it was 13 years late, it was time for some changes. Even if it was someone as hopeless as Jiraiya, Naruto needed a positive figure in his life. I need to make this right, if that's even possible. Staring up at the starry night sky with a weary look overcoming his features. A look fitting that of a grizzled, middle-aged, two-war veteran that now had his most difficult task by far staring him in the face. Jiraiya needed to figure out how to be a dad. Naruto. I'm truly sorry. I haven't been there nearly enough for you. If anything was going to change, it would be him. Who said you can't teach an old dog new tricks? What did you say, sensei? The blonde sputtered. Were his ears clogged? He couldn't have heard that right, there was no way. I said, I quit. The sage said matter-of-factly. Quit what? What are you talking about? What the hell happened last night? Jiraiya chuckled. I just told you. I'm done writing those books. Forever. For a moment, it felt as though the genin's brain stopped functioning. This made absolutely no sense. His godfather, the biggest perv alive, had to have been joking. Yeah, this was just some bad joke. I know that you're mad at me, but you aren't funny, you know that? Naruto didn't believe his own words. Jiraiya didn't look like he was lying. But I'm not joking, kid. I swear. Looking into his eyes, the blonde knew it to be true. Are you okay, sensei? He asked slowly. Did you hit your head on something? The Sannin chuckled, but shook his head, further confounding the boy. No, kid. I feel fine. Continuing to reassure that he was in his right mind. Despite that, Naruto still looked at him like he had 3 heads. Even so, as much as I hate when you peep and write, the sales of your books bring in a lot of money that you use for the good of the village. Without it, how are you going to fund your spy network? Jiraiya waved that question off as if he didn't really care about it. The village has plenty of money to handle my network. I chose to fund it myself so I could have a bit more sovereignty in what my spies look into. When I turn it over to the Leaf, while I may lose a lot of autonomy, it's a small price to pay. The sage smiled, seemingly content with this decision. Naruto squinted in confusion. In exchange for what? He asked. Jiraiya flashed a toothy smile. Why, being your full-time guardian, of course. Silence. Huh? Naruto sputtered out. What the hell was this old man talking about? If you've taught me anything, brat, it's that I have to be better. Much better. Jiraiya thought about all the mistakes he has been making and the fact that despite all that, Naruto doesn't hate him for it. If he had good people caring for him from the beginning, he would realize just how much I failed him. What are you talking about? Naruto asked with genuine bewilderment. You haven't done anything wrong. In the blonde's eyes, he was the best. Jiraiya was, by far, the closest thing to a father the genin would ever know. Sure, he had his flaws, but who didn't? Naruto. Jiraiya placed both hands on the boy's shoulders and looked him dead in the eyes. I've done everything wrong. His words didn't sound dejected or bitter. Jiraiya was simply just openly acknowledging the truth. It may be small, but this is only going to be the start. My Rezir. He caught himself, turning his head to the side in embarrassment. No excuses. Locking eyes with the boy once more, he continued. My perving, writing those books, because of my selfishness, I ignored you and you suffered from it. I failed you. Naruto didn't want to think about it, but when his teacher stared at women all day instead of focusing on him and his training, it hurt. Looking back, it stung even more now that he knew Jiraiya was his godfather. The only family he had left. Though, it didn't cross the boy's mind much because of where they currently were. Away from human society, in Mount Mayaboku, it almost forced Jiraiya to focus on him. There were no pretty girls here unless the pervert had a thing for frogs. Yet, in the back of his mind, he feared that when they went back it would revert to normal. He would be ignored again. It was something he refused to think about. When he did, all of these negative thoughts about his godfather, that the blonde didn't even know he had, began to flood his mind. It made him feel terrible. But this news took a weight off of the boy he hadn't even known was there. Naruto smiled sincerely, which made the sage smile back just as brightly in return. Who needs those books? Jiraiya said with a hint of humor. After all, you're the successful author now. Maybe, if you prove yourself, I'll let you inherit the network, brat. The toad sage ruffled his godson's spiky blonde hair. Well, with you as my master, I bet I'll be ready to handle it, he. The genin chuckled, his arms now placed casually behind his head. Jiraiya smirked. Not because of me, kid. He thought to himself with a hint of admiration for the boy. You'll be able to earn it all on your own. I know it. That's it for part 4 of this story. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.